Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Racing. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my lugubrious co-host, Chris Racing. I think, tell you what, it's not going to start off the nicest. And I think we've got a bit of an endemic problem in the Amazon community. For those of you in Ann Arbor, that means a big problem, a widespread problem. That problem is the disease of overcomplication. In my opinion, the act of arbitrage really is pretty straightforward. Now, this is whether it's wholesale, retail, online arbitrage. Does it sell? Is it profitable? Can I sell it? Now, are there other factors that you should look into? Yeah, of course. And we've covered a ton of those here on the show. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to those three questions. And in a world that is seemingly more and more complex, I think it's important for us to use first principles thinking and mental models to help us think more clear, make better decisions, and reduce the amount of bad decisions we make due to overanalyzing or even decision fatigue, which is probably an entire podcast in and of itself. And today, we're going to be talking about mental models that you can use in your Amazon business to make the best decisions to help you grow. Now, before we dive in, you guys know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for this show. So if you find some value in this episode, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube and leave us a review or drop a comment. The only way for us to grow the podcast is to show the algorithm people are hitting those buttons and leaving comments, and it'll be a huge favor to us to help us keep bringing this content to you guys. Now, before we get started, I'm guessing we should probably talk a little bit about what mental models are. Chris and I both happen to be nerds who read a lot of Charlie Munger, read some Warren Buffett, read about these guys, read what they've written, and also read things like the Farnham Street blog that is often talking about mental models and thinking more clearly. Matter of fact, Chris, you just shared a great book recommendation that was on sale I picked up last night. Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish. That one, yeah. I'm excited to dive into that.
Yeah, that's a good read.
Yeah. But I want you guys to imagine for a moment that what mental models are. These are mental tools or frameworks that you can use to kind of understand and interpret the world around you. They're sort of like the lenses in a pair of glasses. They kind of help you focus on what's important, get you to filter out the noise and only see the signal and kind of see situations a little bit more clearly. No need for, these abstract concepts. Instead, we can use kind of practical ways of thinking to guide our decisions. And we can do this from the smallest daily tasks to the most complex business challenges. Mental models are really meant to simplify complex situations by distilling them down to their core components. Instead of getting lost in the details or overwhelmed by too much information, mental models allow you to zero in on what really matters. They also help you to ask the right questions, consider the right variables, and weigh the potential outcomes more effectively if you use these mental models correctly. For Amazon sellers, every decision that you make can have a pretty significant impact on your business. Whether it's choosing which products to source, setting the right prices, or deciding how to allocate your time and your resources. And I think this is doubly important for those of you who may have a 9-to-5 job and or a family. These kind of mental models can reduce the mental clutter and allow you to think more clearly, even though you're tired and maybe even a little hangry. By the way, go grab a snack and have a little water. Now, mental models act as shortcuts for your brain. They help you make faster decisions, and can keep you ahead of the competition, or at least the same level as them, if they might have more time in this business or more time to allocate to this business than you are. Now, why are mental models important? We know, just based on the content that Chris and I put out, that Amazon is fast paced and often unpredictable. We never know when a brand is going to get gated. We never know when Amazon's going to make some sort of change, or Amazon's going to introduce some new fee that we need to react to. So, with so many of these factors at play, including market trends, competition, costs, and so on, we need to have a set of reliable mental models that will help you cut through all of the complexity and still make a good decision. In essence, we're trying to give you a mental toolkit today. And the more of these that you have, and the better you know how to use them, the more equipped you are to tackle any situation that comes your way. And as a business that, you know, it's simple but can be complex, the ability of you to make very quick decisions or make good decisions are going to be incredibly important. So, I mean, let's dive in. I mean, Chris, did I miss anything there?
No, I think similar to like when you shared the document with me, I told you this is going to put names to a lot of things that are familiar to a lot of people, and that by itself is helpful, because if there's one that you're weak on, or one you want to know more about, at least you have a title to to go pop into the Google search bar, and you can find more about it. So and by the way, when this publishes, we're going to be low 30s, 30 some odd days before the very first day of Q4. So this is important stuff, if there are weaknesses or things you need to fine tune, because we're getting into a crucial part of the calendar.
Absolutely. And the nice thing is I don't know, what I love about mental models is it really does help you think clearly quickly. Because we really can overanalyze just about anything, whether it's choosing to sell a particular product, or, allocate some of our time and resources to learn a new software, whatever it is. Like, there is some sort of framework that we can use to make the decision a whole heck of a lot easier, rather than, spend hours or even days trying to figure out whether or not, it's something we should do. So I don't know. That's what I love. But let's dive into the first one. So I tried to kind of lay these out, kind of in a manner, in a order that makes sense, where they kind of all stack on top of each other. So hopefully we accomplish that today. But the first one is called the circle of competence. Circle of competence. The first rule of competition is that you're more likely to win if you play where you have an advantage. If you're a sports fan, you know that home field advantage is a real thing. And we've interviewed people on this pod who have come from different backgrounds. So, for example, we've had folks who have matter of fact, just last week, Sadiq came from selling shoes on marketplaces like Goat and StockX. We've had other people like Perry, who have been on the show, and he's got a background in lean management. And these sellers have done well by sticking to their circle of competence, but just like choosing a larger marketplace to sell in the example of Sadiq. In the example of Perry, he has been able to refine his processes over time, make them as quick as possible, make them be able to get product out the door like crazy fast. And that's allowed him to buy products today, have them shipped out tomorrow. It's a huge competitive advantage, because a lot of people, even those who do retail arbitrage, they may do RA for 3, 4, 5 days in a row and then send in a shipment. Where product is in today, it is out the door tomorrow morning. everyone has some sort of circle of competence, and you should have the ability to draw parallels from those competencies into your Amazon business. You just have to figure out what yours is and how you can do that. And I don't know, maybe we should give some more examples if that makes sense. Hey, Amazon sellers, are you tired of juggling multiple tools to manage your FBA business? Well, say goodbye to the chaos and hello to Boxum, the all-in-one software that streamlines your shipments, inventory, and profitability tracking in just a few clicks. With Boxum, you'll cut your shipment time in half, gain real-time insights into your business, and keep your inventory under control, all from one simple, intuitive dashboard. Don't waste time. Try Boxum today and take your Amazon FBA game to the next level. Check it out over at cleartheshelf.com/Boxum and start your 14-day free trial now.
Yeah, well, my personal example, I spent 20 years in finance, whether it be mortgages, auto loan financing, home financing. And I've been on the front end and the back end. I originated loans. I looked at a whole lot of credit scores. I learned about, what affects credit score. I know how to improve it and what the key points are. I know a lot about that. And then, you calculate debt ratios and whatnot with originations and so that all, the money part of it was a solid stepping stone. And it's not even that detailed. You don't have to be some savant in whatever you were before you started Amazon. If you were a server or a bartender, you have people skills, and that's going to aid you when you go in and talk to a store manager, and that could help you build a connection and build your personal network and maybe get you in to the back room before stuff hits the clearance aisles, and it could help secure a lot of profitable inventory that way. So don't think you need you need to be a master in some sort of field, to feel that you're competent in one of the skills that can help you. There's really a lot to it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm going to make a little aside for a moment. Speaking of getting into back rooms and things like that, just yesterday in our school group FBA Today, which is free to join for now. We might make it like $1 or $7 to try to get some of the scammers to stop trying to get in. But someone shared this exact story. They had talked with somebody. They were able to, start getting a text message relationship with a manager. And so we actually created a business card template that people can use, which is in our school group. Just go to school.com/FBA-today and join up for free. Sorry, that was a little aside.
That's SKOOL in case you're not
Yes.
familiar with the platform. I'm not sure I would have found it if I didn't know it was spelled with initially.
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? In that story, she was filling her cart, and it was the manager that struck up the conversation, asking her, if she, I forget what the manager thought it was something else, but then she said, no, I'm reselling, and it started a conversation. But that's shows you how easy it is. It's simply just she was just being a regular person, and just returning, friendly conversation. If somebody coming over and saying, hey, what is it, what you do? Or what do you do? That's not that hard to replicate and initiate on your own. You just simply have conversations and you get to talking and talk about overcomplicating something. Networking is something that we kind of grind over unnecessarily.
I agree. Absolutely.
So second one we're going to talk about is the margin of safety. And this is easily overthought. Another thing aside from marketing that people tend to grind over, but it's necessary up to a point. When you're sourcing, you need to factor in a safety net. Basically the basic questions: is the product still profitable at its lowest price over the last 6 or 12 months, or however far back you want to look? What does worst case scenario look like? What happens when more sellers come onto the product? We know that there are lead lists out there, there are cook groups and whatnot, and any product is susceptible to a wave of sellers coming on. So if that's happened throughout history, that's why you look back at, over a product's history and see if that scenario played out, and see how bad it is. Is there seasonality to a product? Is there any reason that different parts of the calendar, different times of the calendar may increase the popularity or demand for a product? That's important to know. These are some of the things that could protect you from losing money. If the price erodes, and that's certainly one of the biggest fears for Amazon sellers, price tanking. You barely go a day if you're on Amazon social media channels without hearing somebody bring that up. The margin of safety can also inform you about how many units to buy. That's the basis on how we decide how much. Too often, we see people spending too long in the data section of a Keep a Graph trying to figure out if they should buy 50 or 100 units based on how many other sellers, what they have in stock, and how often the buy box is rotating, and what those percentages are, and on and on. The data isn't gospel, right? That's important to note. And it needs to be taken with a large grain of salt. And then also, you should be treating your catalog like an ETF, an exchange traded fund. It's not a gamble on an individual stock. That's the basic premise behind, an inch, a mile, a mile wide, and an inch deep and a mile wide. Easy for me to say. We always joke about me being an eternal test buyer. I seem to live in those small quantities, but that's to protect myself. It's to protect against the unknowns and the unpredictability of Amazon. Listing suppressions, deleted listings, random gatings, IP complaints, high price errors, on and on. There's pitfalls all over the place. So I'd rather lose 10 to 20 units than 100 or 200 that I took a gamble on. There's always another opportunity to buy, or sell in another marketplace if the profit's higher. So now this is it's a fine edge though, Chris, right? Like with the margin of safety, it's necessary to an extent. Where does the line? Where do you cross the line, in your opinion?
That's a that's a good question, because I do think that, I like this mental model, but on the other hand, it would be very easy to overanalyze this, and oh well, the price dropped 50% for an hour in Keepa. Oh man, I'm not going to be profitable there. That's where you could really fall into this trap. My opinion is that you should at least try to, like, if over the past year the average price is, let's say, $40, but over the past year maybe it's dropped to $30, where your break even, I don't know, 20% of the time, like, that's totally fine. I don't think it needs to be overthought about any more than that. I know personally, I'll look at the average price for the past 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days. And then I'll look at what the lowest price is over the past year. If I'm break even, or even if it's negative, 10% ROI or something like that for, 10, 20% of the time, I'm cool with it. Chances are there's going to be a profit on there, as long as I reprice appropriately and things like that. Um, my opinion is it's important because people are worried about losing money so much. And it's just kind of one of those hedges against your bet, because honestly, that's what we're doing. I saw something interesting on Twitter. Someone was going down the whole, oh, everything, sky is falling, everything's horrible. This brand is going gated, and this brand, and so on. And Jamie Huff, who is he's a good seller, he was like, I'm not really worried about it. He's like, I've got 700 SKUs. I'm no more than 20 deep on any single SKU. If I lose a couple, so be it. that is kind of, I mean, that's the ultimate flex as an Amazon seller, right?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe I lose a couple, no big deal. I've got this whole big catalog to take care of me otherwise. Um, and then on the opposite side of that, there's Corey Ganem, who we've had on the show before, and I'm not saying anything bad here, but I know that he posted recently he had like, I don't know, it was like 6,000 or I don't know, 12, I can't remember. It was a big number worth of product that went restricted or something. Something happened. And for me, that would, I mean, I would be awful deflated. Corey is built different, and he was like, yeah, we'll get this taken care of, no big deal. But for other people, that would be a reason to get out of this business. And using this mental model, you protect yourself from all of that, whether it's price erosion, whether it's being too deep on a particular product. Um, yeah, I really do think we should treat our businesses like a Vanguard fund and not, like picking and choosing individual stocks. I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is depending on where you are in your journey, um, because when you first start out, a lot of new people, they tend to set unrealistic parameters, on what
Hmm.
they want to source. Not only are you going to be restricted in a whole lot of stuff, you're going to be in the sandbox for a while when you first start. But then if you're also sourcing and you won't take a minimum of 100% ROI, you're not going to find a lot of stuff. You need to understand how restrictive that is. And that's, get out in the community, talk to some people, get a better sense for what is normal and what should be expected. Um, but once you get that dialed in, once you kind of get a little more realistic and you're like, okay, other sellers are setting minimum ROIs in this range. I'm going to do what they do because they're more experienced. But once you get that dialed in, you can actually set yourself up so that your sourcing under worst case scenario is not catastrophic.
Hmm.
That's essentially, and that's a that's a very uh, vague definition, but that's intentional. Just make sure what you're going to do isn't catastrophic, and then just keep going. I think the answer to the question in a more general sense of when is the margin of safety too much is when it leads to inaction.
Hmm.
If it actually stops you in your tracks, you're overthinking it. So it's
Yeah.
necessary, but needs to be used with caution, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. And I don't know. There's My whole thing is that by using this margin of safety, I've seen not a ton, okay, but I've seen a handful of people who have over leveraged themselves. And then they get out of the business, and of course, they're sour on this because what they did is what everybody does, which is not the case. But they over leveraged. They went deep on one or two products, hundreds of units deep, and they lost all this money, for one reason or another. Maybe it was a suspension, maybe it was price tanking, whatever it is, and then they can't pay the American Express bill. um, that is what you want to avoid, and that's what this margin of safety allows you to do. um, on the other hand, what it also allows you to do is it allows you to play an infinite game. If you play an infinite game, you don't lose, and as long as you don't lose, you can keep going until you figure it out, and eventually you play long enough, you win, which is kind of what we want to do on Amazon and business in general. you know um I mean, that's playing infinite games is a whole nother thing we could talk about, but we'll be on this topic forever. So let's move on to opportunity cost. And this is something I don't think Amazon sellers think about quite enough. Um, Opportunity cost is considering the cost of missed opportunities when making a decision. Uh, Simply, it's kind of like, what am I giving up if I choose this option? So, and I'll give you an example. Imagine you're out doing some retail arbitrage, and you find two products on the shelf. There's product A, product B. Product A has a potential profit of $10 a unit, and product B has a potential profit of $15 a unit. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, I'm going to take product B. Of course, it gives me a 50% higher profit than product A. But here's where opportunity cost comes into play. If you buy product B, what if it's a bit of a slower seller than product A? You can buy product A, you know that it sells pretty well. It sells well all year round, and you take that lower margin and you might make your money back a little bit faster. Product B, maybe it's seasonal, and you just missed the seasonality of it, and you might have to hold on to it for 6 months or even a year before it starts to really sell again. By taking product A, it would actually allow you to scale your business faster because of the speed at which you get your original capital back and your reinvestable profits. And the opportunity cost of product B over product A is not just the immediate $5 difference in profits. It's also the lost potential to be able to reinvest those profits sooner. And we'll talk about the speed of money a little bit later as well. But you give up a ton by not being able to compound faster, in my opinion.
Aesop hates this mental model, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that, as far as money goes, and opportunities go, the hare beats the tortoise every time. And this, if this sounds familiar, if you've heard, fast nickels versus slow dimes, that's basically, a summary of opportunity cost. And what's the other one? What's the military one? Is slow as smooth? What's that?
Slow as smooth, smooth as fast.
Right. That doesn't like the opportunity cost mental model either.
No.
Or maybe we could shoehorn it in somewhere. Yeah, but this is yeah, you need to I fall for this sometimes. I tend to like the a little bit more profit. I'm okay with it slow. But if I skew too much in that direction, if too much of my catalog is that type of stuff, I get in trouble. And I'm just not, I start like, wanting to shake my computer or something, because the payouts just aren't quite happening. The slow, big profit ones, the tortoises are nice complements, but you really need to have a stable of hares in there.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons.
I have seen in the past where people, will give certain sellers a hard time. Sellers who might be open with their numbers and things like that, because all of their products might make 75 cents, might make a dollar. I think Buy Boxers shared like their top 20 or 30 ASINs one time, and shared like what the profits on each sale were. And I don't think that there were very many over $2 in profit. But what was missed is the fact that those guys were probably selling thousands of units per month. And so they were moving volume very, very quickly, which allowed them to get that, money back so fast. And, it's all right. Actually, I saw an example of this very same thing recently, wondering how a seller of a certain size could have so few SKUs. And I was like, well, it's pretty simple. They're investing their money for speed in a very narrow set of SKUs, and they're just trying to turn over their inventory just at an insane speed. So
yeah, we talk about the margin of the big boys all the time. Walmart runs somewhere in the 2 to 3% margin. That's all speed. It's worked out pretty well for billions of reasons
Yep.
when they report earnings. Next, not to be confused with the Stephen King Mr. Mercedes book or series. I believe there's a few of those. But the next mental model we want to talk about is Mr. Market. The Mr. Market concept was made popular by legendary investor Benjamin Graham, who was also well studied and idolized by Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. It's meant to personify the market as an emotional character who's often irrational. Mr. Market has mood swings. Sometimes he's overly optimistic, and other times he's downright pessimistic. As an Amazon seller, you need to recognize when Mr. Market is in one of these moods and avoid being swayed by his irrational behavior. You don't want to source items where prices have spiked unless there's an evidence-based reason, such as seasonality, virality, or a product's been discontinued. Demand's going to go up if availability goes down. Otherwise, you may be holding the bag on a losing product when the market finds its right mind again. And then on the flip side, you don't have to cut your price immediately when others do the same. There's lots of reasons others may tank a price out of the blue. They may have their particular product may be coming up against an expiration date. They may have primitive repricer models or settings or companies that they use. They may be liquidating to move into other products. They may be liquidating because of aged inventory. So you need to have rules in place rather than react to what Mr. Market does. Prices often stabilize, and you always need to look at longer term trends. You want to focus on the fundamentals from a keep graph.
Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show.
What do you think? What are your thoughts on Mr. Market, Chris?
So this one sounds a little bit silly. You try to personify, one of these things. It sounds a little silly, but here's the reason I think this one is so important for Amazon sellers. Every time, someone complains about the price tanking on a product, I always see them trying to rationalize it. I know what the buy cost is on this, and this is stupid. They're losing, $15 every time they sell one of these. You cannot do that. You cannot try to rationalize what's going on because you don't actually know what the other seller is doing. You talked about short dated product. You talked about a bad repricer setting. You talked about liquidating. Like those are all things that they do happen on occasion, and trying to rationalize why it's happening, I think, is silly. Instead, we really do. We just have to have rules. That way we can take the emotion. Like there should never be emotion in your Amazon business, in my opinion. Even when you get suspended, you want to go punch a wall? Sure, I get that. But that is not going to help us in any way whatsoever. And I think when we start to kind of think of what happens sometimes to Amazon products, as this kind of irrational, crazy Mr. Market, it can help us kind of stay sane for a little bit when it's very easy to, want to blow our top or try to rationalize what can just be irrational behavior by the market.
Yeah. This is something fighting Mr. Market or fighting against Mr. Market. It's something I do like on a personal basis too. One of my, I don't know, for lack of a better word, mantras, that I try to remember is I get caught up thinking that everyone else thinks the same way I do.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone does something that just throws me for a loop. It confuses me, and it happens when I talk to people too, even, just, they call that the curse of knowledge. It's like once you learn something, you can't imagine yourself not knowing it anymore. So
Mhm.
it can lead to impatience, with newer sellers, because how do you not get this? It's like, just because you learned it years ago, that's not reason to be frustrated with a newer seller who's on their own chapter 2 or chapter 1, even though you're farther advanced. um, so that's kind of separating yourself and thinking of it like, okay, not everybody knows what I know, not everyone thinks the way I do, not everyone has the same coupon codes I do. Which, what, you find your first honey hole of coupon codes that you're not sure a whole lot of people get, and this Mr. Market and how to relate to it will all come into play. Because there
Mhm.
are people with better codes than you, there are people with better sources than you, potentially. There are people with cheaper prep cost than you, if they have any at all. Like, we talked to Sam's doing millions prepping it all herself. So you can't just sit there and go, why would you tank the buy box? I know what it costs. Throw in prep and ship, and well, that doesn't necessarily tell the story. You can't
Mhm.
assume, it's a level playing ground all the time.
Yeah. And it's not always downward movement either. You know,
Hmm.
I'll be honest with you. I looked at something just recently. Matter of fact, I think I may have shared it with you, where the price it was like 11.97 or it was 12.15. It was somewhere in there. And the first thing that I thought was, what is this person thinking? Because it should have been priced at 9.99 instead of over $10. And I mean, it just happens. Rationally, my way is probably right, but you know, the market is not always rational. Um,
Hmm.
all right, and talking about curse of knowledge, man, got to be careful about that being a parent, don't you? I've had that happen a couple of times lately, where I want to reach out and touch the kid, and I'm like, I I've got a few years experience, so let's hold on for a second.
Oh,
Um,
just blow your top, and it's like, it's so hard. There was an open can of salsa in the cupboard, right? Like, it's like, what, and she said, well, that's where it was before. Okay, I get it.
yep,
Uh, try to let's try to get the blood, away from my face a little bit. Let's try not to be so flushed, and let's talk this out. So
yeah,
yeah, I get it.
yeah. All right, here's one of my favorites, Occam's razor, and we've talked about this in the past, but it's a good one to bring up again. Occam's razor tells us that the simplest answer is often the right one. Uh, you know, when you're faced with kind of multiple explanations, multiple strategies, the one that requires the fewest assumption is probably the best choice. Not always, but probably. Okay. You can spend a ton of time, trying to figure out these elaborate theories involving all sorts of metrics and complex analysis of the products you're looking at. But the simplest explanation, the one that most aligns with the facts that you have the facts you have at hand, are probably it's probably the right one. It's kind of easy to get caught up in the weeds. You go look at daily buy box rotations. You are trying to track the stock history of the competitors on the listing. You're overthinking those price fluctuations. In reality, you probably don't need to dive that deep. Um, if you use Occam's razor, you kind of cut through the noise and really focus on the basics. Does it sell? You can check the BSR and the reviews. That's really all you need to know. Is the BSR moving? Are the reviews going up? Is the seller count going up and down? Uh, do I need to know the buy box rotation? No, because that data is actually not as accurate as you might think anyway. It cannot pull up uh, it cannot pull up buy boxes in different parts of the country, which we know there are regional buy boxes. Is the stock history always correct? No, there are too many things that can make the stock history dip and then go back up. And Keepa will oftentimes count those as sales. You think FC transfers. And I know from personal experience and from others telling me that Keepa won't always pick you up, even though you have stock in Amazon warehouses ready to sell. You just might never show up there. And then, the other thing, well, how much is Amazon sharing the buy box if you want to hop on a listing with Amazon? You may never be able to know because Keepa doesn't track that data every single second of every single day. It might be once an hour, it might be once every couple of hours, depending on how popular a particular product is. Number two, can you sell it? Are you ungated? And are you being compliant with any brand restrictions? If you can list the products without any issues, that's really all you need to know. Maybe double check and see if there's any history of IP complaints on it. And then, is it profitable? You go back to that margin of safety. Do the numbers add up? That's all you need to do. It's those three things. But I see too often people will send me a question. Hey, this seller has 32% of the buy box. Do you think I'll be able to sell even though between these two sellers it's 32 and 33? That only leaves 33% of the buy box. You gotta stop. You got to go back to the simplest answer, which is if you see the number of sellers moving up and down, the buy box is rotating a lot more than what Keepa will show. And you really should just do a test order. That's all it is.
Yep. Again, what's the worst that can happen? If you throw a test buy out there, so you lose 10, 20 units or whatever your test buy quantity is. This is like the beacon for the overthinkers. Mm-hmm. It's and it's true because think about all the terminology that we use. When something's complicated or something's complex and we're trying to make sense of it. Those terms. What do? We break it down, or we boil it down. It's all a matter of simplifying it. That's basically how we understand or try to understand and come to grips with complex scenarios. I'm not gonna. I should read more about this because it's such a strong, basic principle to live by. Again, another one that I'm guilty of not being proficient enough in Occam's razor. But I skew. I kind of my default is to overthink. So this is for the people that need to get out of their own way. This is one to maybe study up on a little bit.
I mean, it makes sense to overthink, and some other mental models will make you overthink. There's second order thinking, there's probabilistic thinking, and all those kind of things. Overthinking is probably what allowed our species to, survive as long as it did. So there's obviously some sort of evolutionary reason for it. But at the end of the day, we're not going out and hunting a Siberian tiger or a woolly mammoth. We're just clicking some buttons to pick some things to sell on Amazon, and maybe we should try to make it as easy as possible on ourselves, because we've got all these other things going. We've got fear and worry that we're going to lose money and all these other things going against us. Let's make it as simple as possible to be able to actually pull the trigger.
Yep. I didn't read the article, but I saw there was an article about picky eaters, and it said, "Are you a picky eater? Well, you likely helped our race survive." So it was something like took it all the way back to like what was poisonous, what wasn't. Like that. There's a meme about mushrooms. How do they find it? Like, oh, this one will make you hallucinate. This one's good with beef. And this one kills you. Like how exactly do we work that all out? But anyway, next we're going to talk about anchoring. Anchoring is a cognitive bias where we rely too heavily on the first piece of information that we receive. And we allow it to dictate our decisions without considering other factors. When it comes to selling on Amazon, this can be particularly dangerous while sourcing products, especially. And here's what we often see. A seller finds a product that looks profitable at first glance, and they're ready to pull the trigger immediately. That initial price or discount sticks in their mind like an anchor. And then they rush to buy it, thinking that, we've struck gold. But here's the thing. Margins aren't just found, like Chris likes to say, they're manufactured. And by falling into the anchoring trap, you might be leaving money on the table. So before you buy before you hit the buy button, you need to take a breath, take a beat, and slow down a little bit. You need to ask yourself, is this really the best deal I can get? And there are certain strategies that you should consider. You could look for a better discount code. Often a little extra research. Everyone's heard me say this over and over again. A little extra research or waiting for a sale can allow you to find discounts that weren't initially apparent, and that other sellers aren't likely to put the effort in to find. Compare with other stores. Another retailer might offer the same product at a lower price or with additional perks, like free shipping or a lower free shipping threshold. This is something I have to do with my VAs all the time. They'll have a good product, but you know what? Too many times you hit that Google search or Google shopping button and you can actually find it cheaper at another store. Discount gift cards. If you're purchasing gift cards at a discount, you can effectively lower your cost even further. I think a lot of people are sleeping on discount gift cards. Consider bulk pricing. Buying in larger quantities might unlock additional savings, and that'll boost the profit margins. Some websites even have a button or a little info box for to request bulk pricing. Take advantage of that. That's why it's there. And customer service. If none of the above are available, you can always hop on websites chat and ask for a discount code, or even ask a site to price match. If you have two sites and one of them has 10% cash back and the other one has 2% cash back, but the 10% cash back site is just a little bit higher, pull up that chat button and ask if they'll price match it. Say, hey, this store over here has it a little bit cheaper. Can you match that? If you match it, you just bumped your cash back by another 8% in this hypothetical. So, too many sellers learn this stuff the hard way. And then they start ranting and raving at Mr. Market, like we talked about before. They jump on what seems like a profitable product, anchored to their initial price and their initial, impression, only to find out later that they could have saved 10% by using a discount code or a discount gift card, or next week it's on sale. The margin difference is small in the micro, but adding 1% over the macro of an entire business can be a massive gain. And we all know that, whether we realize it or not, because we scratch and claw for every extra cashback percentage we can get, or, discount code 15% over 10%. Can't scoff at that. That's significant, especially over the volume that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. This actually reminds me, I need to reply to an email about bulk pricing that I've got sitting in the inbox. We try to practice what we preach here, but yeah, this one is incredibly important. I really do see too often, and this goes for retail arbitrage too. All the examples here were really online arbitrage stuff, but if you go back to that business card example, that is an easy way where you can get yourself out of the anchoring trap doing retail arbitrage. You see something on clearance, it's profitable, throw it right in the cart, but there's 30 others there. And if you're willing to buy all of them, with just asking, you might get that discount. Yeah, this one I think is massively important, because I don't think enough people take the time to try to find additional ways to lower their cost of goods sold.
And as much as people want replens and whatnot, if you can find a discount that the majority of other sellers aren't going to find or take the effort to get, Yeah, that means it could stay in your catalog and it could be replenished multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't, don't go buying a replens course, if you're not exhausting every discount that you can possibly find.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the sunk cost fallacy. Um, Based on the number of times that we've brought this up on the podcast, you would think that we don't need to talk about it anymore. I would imagine that we've probably talked about this more than any other Amazon podcast that is out there. But I'm not sure if it's sunk in. So the sunk cost fallacy is this tendency to kind of continue investing in a product simply because you've already spent time, you've spent money, you've spent resources on it, even though it's clearly not paying off. It's the epitome of throwing good money after bad, and I see way too many people fall into it. So imagine this: you found a product, seems like a great deal. You bought a decent sized amount of inventory, but the product it's just not selling for one reason or another. Maybe it's become suppressed. Maybe the buy box has been lost, and the sales rank absolutely craters. But it starts sitting in the warehouse for weeks and then months, and then you're measuring it in quarters. And in some cases, I've seen people measure it in years. And so you've got all this tied up capital that could be used somewhere else. But you hesitate to lower the price. You don't want to liquidate it, or you don't want to just pull back the inventory. And you're making this decision while you're also paying additional storage fees, which reduces any profit you might be able to make if the market comes back on this particular product. Now, why are you doing this? Well, you're invested in the product. You've married to the idea that you made this good decision, and accepting a loss, is like admitting defeat. It's important to remember that money and time you've already spent. Okay, the minute you click buy on a product from a retail website, it's a sunk cost. That money has been spent. Okay. The only way to get it back is to sell that product. Now, whether that's getting a portion of it back or getting all of it back plus a profit doesn't matter. There's only one way to get it back. And it should not influence your future decision that you have sunk that cost already. Uh, what matters now is whether if continuing to hold on to that inventory is really the best use of your resources. And this doesn't go for just inventory either. You can fall into the sunk cost fallacy trap with other things like, say, software, for example. You've spent time learning it. You get the settings just right. You've talked with support regarding issues that you've had or ideas. You're locked into some really great pricing that you might lose, but you don't use the software anymore. Or maybe it no longer serves the purpose for your business that it once did. You know, but you say, I'm going to get back to it. I am going to use it again. I think there's another use for it. I'll come back to it. Well, the thing is the money that you've spent, it's all a sunk cost. You're not gonna get those sunk costs back. And the best thing you can do is kind of stop the hemorrhaging. So we need to be super careful about allowing the sunk cost fallacy to dictate our decisions. If product isn't performing, you need to not be afraid to cut your losses and move on to free up that capital and the mental energy you spend on looking at it every couple of weeks or every month, for better opportunities that have a higher chance of success.
So if people are out there going, oh, Chris and Chris, they're talking about the sunk cost fallacy again, uh, and they're like, I don't know why they think it's such a big deal. One of the biggest fighters against sunk cost fallacy in the entire U.S., probably the biggest, maybe. I mean, I'd have to think about it to find somebody bigger. One of the biggest fighters fighting against sunk cost fallacy is Gamblers Anonymous, because that's essentially how gamblers get in trouble. when I was younger, this isn't, I had a gambling problem. That's not where the story's going. But, um, I used to think I had a roulette system, right? I concocted this using flawed mathematical models and whatnot. But I basically had this method of betting to where I thought I had at least a 70% chance to at least make my money back. And it was this system based on, you know, putting, money on red and then individual bets on different black numbers. And then I thought I could spread, I thought I could get an edge on the house, right? Yeah, that's famous last words. Um, and I would test this, right? And in roulette, there's this there's this flawed logic that you get to where you start thinking certain numbers are due, right? And because I put a big bet on red, and then I put individual bets on black, and then I would watch, and roulette, they actually show you the past rolls. They always have
Mhm.
a little board up there showing you what's been rolled over the last, I don't know, 20 spins of the wheel or whatnot. And that is not helpful because of a thing called probability. But what these gamblers, or what my stupid ass started doing, was thinking, oh my gosh, black hasn't hit in the last 6 spins. It's been red 5 times, and then it's been 0 or double 0. Black is due. Uh, and that's not true, right? It's every single spin, each individual spin, the odds are exactly the same, no matter what happened on the previous spin or any spins prior to that, right? But you sit at the table and you're invested, and or you're down and you're trying to win some back, and you start thinking, oh, this is due. You start thinking certain numbers, when really, just like scenarios with Amazon sellers dealing with the sunk cost fallacy, the most money that you can make, the vast majority of the time, would be to cut your losses and get up and walk away. you know so
Mhm.
shout out to Gamblers Anonymous, on the eternal fight against sunk cost fallacy.
Right. Your roulette system is a lot more complicated than mine was.
Yeah.
When I was 18, tail end of 18, I won a trip selling life insurance to the Bahamas, and in the Bahamas, you only have to be 18 to gamble.
Mm,
So of course, before I went down, being the entrepreneurial kid I am, I learned a roulette system where you bet on one color, and if you lose on that roll, you double the bet on the opposite color, and you do this back
okay.
and forth until you win on one of the colors. And I think they said that this puts it from a 49% in favor of the house to something like a 58% in favor of the gambler. And I was young and dumb enough to think that that was actually the case back then.
Yeah. Yeah. That's there's a baseball betting system similar to that, as far as taking the favorites versus the underdog. If the underdog actually wins, because baseball is played most of the time in 3 and 4 game series. A
Hmm.
team will come to town and they'll play 3 or 4 times in a row. So it's when there's a clearly better team against an inferior team, if the inferior team wins, pulls an upset, then you double the bet on the favorite the next day, because the thought is in baseball that the numbers are always true, which that part's true. Um, the system that'll make you rich may not, likely isn't true.
Right. That this is a bit of an aside, but you show me someone who owns their own business who did not have a story of maybe almost becoming a degenerate gambler, and that's an entrepreneur I don't trust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the most chilling stat um, that I ever heard was that professional gamblers, the people who do make a living gambling professionally, their win ratio is about 54%. Or no, I'm sorry, 50, because it's got to be able to cover the juice. So it's got to be higher than 55. It's like under 60%, right? So it's enough to cover the juice, and it's just a small little margin over that. Just blew my mind, but then it eventually makes sense. So like doubling down, a sibling to doubling down, we're going to talk about compound interest next. And this is one of those, the cliche iceberg motivational posters. It's you can hear about compound interest and you go, eighth wonder of the world, whatever. Buffett talks, blah blah blah. But then the more you look into it and you realize the power of it, it is incredible. So Warren Buffett said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, right? He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And this principle doesn't just apply to your savings account or investments. It is actually relevant to Amazon sellers as well. How, you may ask? At its core, the idea that small gains, when reinvested, can grow exponentially over time. In the context of your Amazon business, it's about taking the profits that you make from a product, reinvesting them into more inventory, and letting those profits generate even more returns. The profits generate more profits. This cycle, when repeated consistently, can turn a modest starting capital into a thriving, scalable business. One of the unique advantages of an Amazon business is the speed at which you can turn your inventory over. And unlike traditional investment vehicles, that might compound annually, selling on Amazon actually allows you to compound your capital a lot quicker. For instance, if you purchase inventory that sells out within a month, you can reinvest the profits from that sale almost immediately into new products. The rapid turnover will accelerate the compounding process, which allows your business to grow faster than if you're relying on slower, more traditional methods of earning interest. And we have an example for you. The math was done in advance, so don't get nervous. But here's the example. Imagine you start with $1,000 and you turn that into $1,200 by selling your first batch of inventory. And then instead of taking the $200 profit and spending it, you reinvest it into more inventory. If you keep doing this, reinvesting your profits rather than cashing out, the gains start to snowball. The $1,200, now assuming the returns are the same across the board, right? So this is in a vacuum. That $1,200 will turn into $1,440. The $1,440 then turns into $1,728. $1,728 turns into $2,073. Take the $2,073 and that turns into $2,488. Take the $2,488 and that'll turn into $2,985. So you see, over time, the compounding effect will transform a small initial investment, in this case, $1,000 turned into $2,985, into a more substantial sum. And that's going to drive the growth of your business exponentially. The example, that's in a vacuum, but that doesn't discount the idea. The logic is solid on this one. If you want to take advantage of this in your Amazon business, just focus on consistently reinvesting your profits. How many times over the interviews and people that we talk to, they spend a whole lot of time not taking any profits at all. That's what this is. This is what growth is. This is what scaling up is. This is the vehicle that you use. How big of a fan are you of compound interest, Chris?
I mean, it's the best thing ever. It really is. And I know it's cliche. It is the eighth wonder of the world. What's that? I think it's the rule of 72 or something. But whatever, I can't remember the math. The math works with that rule. But being able to do it so quickly, like I don't know of any other businesses that allow you to compound so quickly. That the example that you had there was it was 20% ROI, over 6 months. You extrapolate that out to a year and it goes from 1,000 into something like $11,000, over
Mhm.
12 months. Uh, and there are people who are happy putting their money into a CD at 5.3% annual interest rate or something like that. Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine? Um,
Even even worse, can you imagine writing the marketing for that?
oh,
Could you imagine working for the bank being like, hey, so our savings accounts just went from 0.5% interest annually. We're actually bumping that up to 0.6. Could you write us an ad and could you get people excited about that, please? like,
right?
like
Yeah,
get out of here.
there are times when people, and like my family have asked me, like, "Oh, hey, how much are you putting into your savings account?" And there have been times when I'm like, "Yeah, that's a waste of space. Like, you shouldn't be putting money in your savings account when I can snowball this money over and over again." They're like, "Oh, well, yeah, you're going to be up a creek one of these days." Not saying you shouldn't have some savings to cover some unexpected expenses, but yeah, it makes zero sense. And I don't know. I just don't know of any other vehicle besides Amazon where you can compound so quickly. And we've talked about it before. You and I could go out, we could do some retail arbitrage today. We could list the item, merchant fulfilled, we could sell it, print a shipping label, have the money back in our bank account tomorrow, and then do it all over again. Um, where can you compound money that quickly?
Only the only other example would be using my roulette system, which you can get in the notes for 99.95.
Right?
I don't want to make money. I just want to sell roulette systems.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess the only other real example might be, you know, selling drugs, but even that, now you gotta sell at a dispensary and stuff. You can't just go pick it up on the corner.
right. Did you ever get the example? The best example is still probably like one of the first ones that I'd ever heard. Did you anybody ever present the choice? I think, and usually it's set up like, okay, here are your choices. You can have $50,000. You have to wait a year. Both scenarios. You can have $50,000 or 100,000 or whatever. $100,000 at the end of a year, or you can have $1 and I'll double it every day for a year, right? And
Yeah.
so everybody kind of goes like, oh, give me $100,000, not realizing that is it $1 or do you start with a penny? What
I
do you
think you start
double
with
it?
a penny and you double it every day.
Okay, yeah, and that's it. If you don't know, it ends up over $1 million over 365 days. So
Yeah. Yeah, it
that's
becomes a
that's
huge amount of
compounding.
money. All right, let's talk about the time value of money. Um, this principle kind of states that money available to you now is worth, and this kind of goes back a little bit to one of our other mental models, but money available to you now is worth more than the same amount available to you in the future. Now, this might sound a little bit simple, but if you apply this to your business, it can really impact how you make decisions. All right. So, why is money worth more now than it is later? Well, it's all about opportunity and your opportunity cost. When you've got cash in hand today, you can invest it immediately and you can generate that compound interest over time. But if you wait, you could lose out on those opportunities. And so for those of us selling on Amazon, this should kind of be a factor in our sourcing, definitely in our pricing. So let me give you an example. Let's say that we go back to those two products that we found earlier. Product A has a decent profit margin, but a longer sell through rate, meaning it's going to take us a few months to sell out. Product B, on the other hand, it has a lower margin, but it sells through faster, and we know that it will sell through much quicker. The time value of money tells us that product B is actually the better choice, even with the lower margin, because it allows us to recover that capital faster. It allows us to reinvest it, and it allows us to start earning returns yet again, taking advantage of compound interest. The rapidity of the reinvestment it's super important if you're trying to build momentum in your Amazon business. A lot of people will tell you not to, to go after those slow quarters rather than the fast nickels. But I do think you need to sort of prioritize some sourcing that will get you a quicker return in the beginning, so that you can reinvest and kind of grow your business a little bit faster. The speed at which money can be turned around, or the shorter your cash on cash cycle is, the more opportunities or the more times you get to take a shot on goal, you're going to have a much better time scaling your business.
Yeah. And if you understood and you understand the value of compound interest, this is the other part of that. It's the speed in which you get that return, right? So if you understood, if you got the part about compound interest, or we were preaching to the choir and you understood it already, you need to get this part too. So it's not only the return, it's how fast you can get the return, and you buckle those two together, and you really understand and trust the power that those two have together. I mean, that's how you get to be that's how you get us to interview you. You'll start doing the numbers. That sounded arrogant, sorry. But you'll start doing the numbers that a bunch of people will want to find out more information about you, and your business, and they'll want to know your secrets if you can get those two dialed in.
Yeah.
So we are the next one we're going to talk about is comparative advantage, another sibling to a previous model that we talked about. But comparative advantage is all about focusing on what you do best, where you are most efficient, and outsourcing the rest. This principle is rooted in the idea that you can maximize your productivity and profitability by dedicating your time and resources to the areas where you have a clear advantage over others. The idea also happens to fly in the face of what a lot of people in the Amazon space will tell you, that you need to be in the trenches, don't outsource, save that money, and whatnot. But as an Amazon seller, you might be great at sourcing products, understanding market trends, or building relationships with suppliers or distributors. And those are your areas of comparative advantage, tasks where your expertise and efficiency translate directly into profits. But what about the other aspects of your business, like repricing, managing account health, or prepping inbound shipments? Those tasks are essential, but they might not be the best use of your time if they don't align with your core strengths. So here's, in that case, this is where outsourcing comes into play. By outsourcing those tasks like repricing, you can leverage tools that are specifically designed to handle these functions more efficiently than you could do on your own. The same goes for managing account health. By outsourcing this to a specialized service, you can ensure that your account stays in good standing. And not only is it in good standing, it frees up your time. Now you can focus on what you're strong at. So an example to help put this into perspective for you. Imagine that you're spending hours each week manually repricing your products like a cave person. Sure, you might save some money by doing it yourself, right? But what's the cost of the time that you're putting in? It's time you could have spent finding new products, negotiating better deals, finding better coupon codes, again, see above, areas where your comparative advantage truly lies, where you have the advantage. You need to focus on what you do best, and whether that's sourcing, product selection, or building relationships, whatever it may be. But you need to focus on what you do best, and then consider outsourcing the tasks that are essential, but not the strongest use of your time, whether it be skill or the task is just mundane, if there's a higher value elsewhere. And by doing that, you'll not only increase your efficiency, but you also position your business for greater growth and profitability. And Chris, you are, especially compared to me, you are the king of outsourcing and protecting your own time, because that's also what it is. It's not just, you have to protect it first, and then so that you can then deploy it in higher profit activities. So what are your thoughts on this model, Chris?
I mean, some would tell me that I'm horrible at this, which I would tend to agree. I think I tend to hold on too much. But we've hired things like, let's talk about this podcast, for example. At the very beginning, we were recording the podcast. We were doing our own editing. We were creating our own thumbnails, and I mean, honestly, it turned this into much more of a chore than what we wanted this to be. And in the example of the podcast, we then hired an editor. So all we have to do is record, download, send it to the editor, and we're done. And we've hired out making thumbnails. So now all we have to do is upload it after we record, and it makes it so much better. And Amazon can be the same way. The first one that you talked about, repricing, that's the first thing. I can't believe how much time some people spend on repricing. Now, I know that it can be complex, but if we go back to the 80-20 rule that we talk about quite frequently, which surprisingly enough, that was not a mental model we brought up today. You can get 80% of the results just by grabbing a good repricer. And then you could probably get, closer to 90 or 95% if you just spend a couple hours learning how to set it up properly and then letting it go do its thing. And you can free up so much time. I remember when I first started, I would spend like 15 to 20 minutes every 3 hours repricing my products for Amazon. And when repricers really became something that were like, oh, this exists now. I mean, I was the first one on board. It was a no-brainer to be able to have repricing done. Back then it was, I think it was once an hour or something like that. But to have repricing automated one time every single hour, so I don't have to do it, it was the best thing ever. And now, I mean, Aura will reprice every minute. If you have hyperdrive, actually it'll reprice even faster that with hyperdrive. But you can reprice every 2 minutes, because that's what Amazon's API allows. And I know a lot of people are going to say things like, oh, well, you're telling new people to outsource, and you really need to know like how to source before you hire a VA team member. Yes, absolutely. You do need to know how to do these things, but do you really need to know how to prep? Do you need to know how to put a sticker on a piece of inventory and put it into a poly bag and slap a shipping label on it? No, you don't really need to. And your time, your return on your time invested is probably going to be higher sourcing than it is making sure that the sticker covers the UPC barcode, so it's not scannable. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I really do think we need to get better about, rather than creating more and more jobs for ourselves, creating a business that frees up our time, because I'd much rather spend an afternoon on the golf course than an afternoon putting labels on products.
Yeah. Because it's, you made your money. They say you make your money when you buy, and the rest of it from there, getting it to Amazon, the prep, pack, and ship part of it is just the necessary part of it. Right. And if you're starting out, if it's part-time, you may not have the resources to outsource that, and it may not be a big deal, if you're starting with a low amount of capital, and you've spent that after, an hour of sourcing, now I've got a window of a few hours to prep and ship and whatnot. Sure. Then yeah, obviously outsourcing, we're not talking it up like it's some magical thing that's all of a sudden, I'm only selling $500 a month. You're not going to become $1 million seller simply by getting a repricer. You need to have the inventory to sell it. Obviously we're not saying that, but let's talk about simple things. We're getting, like we said, it's there's only 30 some odd days before Q4 starts. And I know you've talked about maximizing Q4, and one of the ways that you like to talk about that is outsourcing household chores. So if it's not something that you do on a regular basis, you may want to think about, if you're in a warmer climate, maybe not mowing the grass yourself. You may want to temporarily hire someone to do that. You may want to have someone clean the house for you, right? Because if you have the capital and if you're good on capital but it's time that you're a little stretched thin on, would you rather be washing the dishes or grabbing more inventory? Because if you're able to, if time is the only thing keeping you from grabbing inventory and taking your Q4 to even greater heights, think about the cost. Look at the cost of having someone do your dishes for you or clean your house or something to free you up. That's exactly what we're talking about here. The time that you'll save, you're going to go source products during an incredibly busy period of the Amazon calendar, and it could lead to thousands. It's exponential what you could pick up if you outsource that.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, well, that's crazy expensive. I can't afford that, et cetera, and so on." It's honestly just not true anymore. I know someone who every Q4 they go from making meals as a family to meal prepping every single week and spending like 6 hours on a Sunday prepping meals for the week. Honestly, waste of time. There are too many services, and I'm not talking having food delivered. That's incredibly expensive over a long course of time. But there's a service here locally that does prepackaged like healthy meals, and it's less than $7 or $8 a meal to choose what you want and have them all delivered to your house, and you just have to pop them into the oven or the microwave, and we're talking like good stuff like steaks and grilled chicken and all that stuff, not garbage food. um you know I this kind of thing, this outsourcing, too often gets thrown in with, well, that's not for me because it's too expensive. But looking a little bit deeper, you can find a lot of things for what is likely a very affordable price.
Yeah, at the very least, it's worth looking into.
Yeah.
It's make your own determination on whether it's too expensive. Don't just go on Mr. Market's opinion.
Now, I mean, we're almost 90 minutes into this, and there are more mental models that I wanted to get to, because to me, and hopefully this is not a dry topic to you guys listening. We'll find out. To me, these are fascinating. They're these lenses that we can look at business through, but there's a bunch that we're not going to get to. We just don't have time for, including things like inversion, which is kind of approaching problems backward and trying to figure out what could go wrong. There's confirmation bias, which I think a lot of Amazon sellers fall into, which is kind of, we tend to search for and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. There's I'll tell you one that is kind of funny to me. A lot of sellers will say, well, I don't sell in shoes and clothing because the returns are too high. There's not any way to make money there. But the biggest sellers, the three largest sellers that we've had on the podcast, are all very heavy in shoes and clothing. There's first principles thinking, which is one of my favorite. It's actually something I love to do with my son. It has backfired on me a little bit, and even at age 11, he asks me why 37 times. But trying to break down complex problems into their most basic elements. I think that oftentimes we as Amazon sellers try to add things on. Let's I want to make this better, so let me add on to it. And if we look at someplace like Tesla or SpaceX, their core philosophy is how much can I actually delete? And if we're not adding at least 10% on to what we're deleting, then we haven't deleted enough. And by using some first principles thinking, we can probably do that to a lot of things in our businesses.
Southwest Airlines
Yes, that's a great example.
Became relevant based on
That's
that.
a great example. Yeah, the paradox of choice. We've talked about trying to simplify things over and over today. We know that too many options can lead to decision paralysis or analysis paralysis. One of the others I wanted to talk about was probabilistic thinking. You know, I see too often that people want black and white. I want, based on this information, is it a yes or a no? But the answer too often in selling on Amazon, in life, it's maybe. We really work in this gray area. In everything. And we're making decisions in our Amazon business based on probabilities. Based on the past data that we have, the probability is that the product is going to stay profitable, when I buy it and go to sell it. Feedback loops, I think, is something else that we should learn about as Amazon sellers. Actions can reinforce or diminish future outcomes. I think we need to work on shortening our feedback loops as Amazon sellers. This is especially for new sellers. I see a lot of new sellers who wait and wait and wait to buy their first product. I'm looking through all of these products to sell, and they're like, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. You actually don't know that because you have not completed a feedback loop. You haven't completed a feedback loop until you have sourced, purchased, sent in, and sold a product on Amazon. You've got to close that feedback loop. And the more often you close that feedback loop, the better and better you'll get at making future decisions. I'll tell you, we'll go. There's like 20 here that I would love to just chat about, but there's one other one that I think is important that Amazon sellers learn about, which is the law of diminishing returns. Beyond a certain point, each additional unit of input yields a progressively smaller increase in the output. I'm going to give you an example of this, which I found really interesting. Chris and we will talk about discount gift cards a lot. I'm a huge fan of discount gift cards. I think, getting an extra 9% is worth it. However, neither of us are at the scale of a Kim and Perry Coughlin or a Jeff Storch or Jassim. I know that Kim and Perry and Jeff, for example, they don't ever look for gift cards because they're at a point where it becomes a law of diminishing return for them to go out and actually spend the time to try to find the gift cards, to use the gift cards, to store those gift cards and make sure that they're actually, have we used all of the money on this one and we got to move to the next one. It becomes too big of a problem and it's not worth the time. It's not worth the margin. It's better that they just find more product to sell and make a little bit of a lower margin than you might be able to make. And I don't think we think about that enough as we get to scale.
That's a great example.
Yeah. As always, we try to end with a quote of the week. And this one comes from Shane Parrish, which is the person who wrote Clear Thinking, Also, the head over at Farnham Street Blog. If you don't read their blog or get their weekly email, you're really missing out. But the quote goes, "Most geniuses, especially those who lead others, prosper not by deconstructing intricate complexities, but by exploiting unrecognized simplicities." And I thought that was was apropos for this particular episode. Hopefully we didn't make this episode too dry. This is something that fascinates me. I think these things can be helpful for Amazon sellers. And I hopefully you guys think so too.
Yeah, these are my favorite kinds of episodes. Yeah, putting a name to something, putting titles to these things, that we think, just kind of keeps me present, and it helps me improve. So if I can kind of anchor that into the title, like, okay, I'm doing this, or just they pop into your head if you study them, or you just know about them. You'll find positive thoughts creeping in, as you understand more of these concepts, and I think it'll make you a better seller, a smarter seller, if you keep them in mind.
Absolutely. Now, Occam's razor would say that you should like this video to help us, hit the algorithm right. All right, that's the pod, everybody. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.